Good evening, everyone. I want to take a quick opportunity to thank everyone for coming this evening to the Community Forum on Water Service in Tacoma Park. Obviously, thank the city for hosting. My name is Patrick Metz. I work for Delegate Mazier. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to be here this evening, and so she's asked me to read a short statement from her. I'm so sorry I can't be there tonight for the Community Forum on Water Service in Tacoma Park. When we scheduled this forum a month ago, there was no way we could guarantee that the fluid and fast-paced legislative calendar in Annapolis would cooperate. Unfortunately, tonight we are debating the House's budget proposal, and I must be there to help defend it as a recently appointed member of the Appropriations Committee. In recent months, there have been few hotter topics than water and sewer service in our communities. Last summer's water main break in Durwood closed many restaurants and businesses in Montgomery County, and the River Road water main break made national headlines. But it hasn't just been in the newspapers, it's been right here in our neighborhoods. My neighbors have stopped me on the street to share their frustration, and many of you in this room have called or emailed my office. Josh Wright and I have had several conversations, and Colleen Clay has been very active in trying to address many of these concerns. I asked to meet with WSSC's interim general manager, Teresa Daniel, in Annapolis last month, and we had a good conversation about the concerns that residents of the city have and about the constraints within which WSSC must operate. They responded in writing to many of the concerns that I raised at that meeting, and they know that the level of service we are receiving stands room for improvement. When I offered to help arrange a community forum with residents tonight where they might share additional concerns and frustrations with them, Teresa agreed immediately. With the help of Mayor Williams, the City Council, and others, we've been able to bring everyone together this evening. WSSC has agreed to come here tonight to get information from you firsthand, not only on maintenance efforts and service outages, but also on road work and other work associated with these projects. There's no shortage of work to be done, in part because we have a good deal of old infrastructure. I think, according to WSSC, it's a third of the city's underground pipes are more than 80 years old. And WSSC, in some ways, is fighting with one hand tied behind their back. Estimates from them and from the county indicate that the rate we're able to fund replacements isn't keeping up with the demand to do so. It's clear, too, though, that some work has been performed by contractors who haven't been effective stewards of ratepayers' money or the city's streets. Again, I apologize for not being able to be here this evening. I hope you'll keep in contact about your concerns, both about water service and about other issues facing the community. I'm going to turn it over now to Mayor Williams and Councilmember Clay for a couple of introductory remarks as well before we have Teresa do the same. If you haven't filled out, there are some forms over there where you can, sort of write down the concern that you've had, when it happened, where it happened, what the response from WSSC has been. What we're going to do is collect those at the end of the night. We're going to give WSSC a copy of all those, and it's going to help us make sure that we can follow up with the concerns that you have in a systematic way. I also know we have some representatives from Councilmember Elrich's office. And I miss anybody else?
And also
and Councilmember Irvin. Great. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Mayor Williams.
Thank you. I'd just like to welcome everybody here tonight and acknowledge that we really appreciate that WSSC was willing to come and talk to us about the projects that have been going on in the city for a number of years. I know that a lot of you have experienced a lot of difficulties with the replacement of the water lines and have contacted me and other members of the City Council over the last couple of years about concerns. I would say that many of us have experienced those concerns ourselves. I lived with the replacement on my street for about 9 months, and I know as we all travel around the city, we get to see the ongoing projects every day, particularly along Carroll Avenue and the streets that feed into Carroll Avenue. And we've had concerns all along about how this would coordinate with construction, the demolition and rebuilding of the fire station in Tacoma Junction, wanting to make sure that there's close coordination so that we don't end up with 2 or 3 different construction projects all converging in the same spot and making the gridlock that we all expect from one project multiplied with 2 or 3 happening at the same point. So the city and our Public Works Director, Darrell Braithwaite, who's also here, have been in close contact with WSSC as problems have come up, and I hope that this evening will go a long way toward the ability of WSSC to get information to all of you who are here and the broader community. This is being televised, and it'll be archived on the web so that anybody who didn't make it here and who needs information or has concerns can go and see that, and that will be archived. So if anybody has any questions or anybody who is here and wants to figure out exactly what was said or felt that they missed something, you'll be able to always go back and see what was said here tonight. And Councilmember Clay, did you want to say something?
Thank you. My name is Colleen Clay. I'm a council member for Ward 2, which is the area that's just a little bit north of Sligo Creek Parkway, between Sligo Creek Parkway and Ethan Allen East-West Highway and around the Forest Park area. And this section is entitled The Local Perspective. And so I just want to tell you a little bit about, kind of categorically, about the things that I hear about from my constituents. When I first became a homeowner in Tacoma Park, I had a broken water meter inside of my house, and I needed WSSC to shut it off at the curb so that I could replace it. And we went back and forth every week. They would come out and look around, poke around with sticks. They came out with metal detectors. They went to Laurel to get the plans for when the place was originally plotted out, and they had 3 different ideas of where it was at. And this went on for a year and a half. And I said, at some point, I'm going to get one of these crazy pinhole leaks I keep hearing about, and then what am I going to do? And so guess what happened? I got a pinhole leak. And I called, and then I just started calling and calling and calling up the chain. And finally then, within about 2 hours of when I started calling, and just pretty frantic and really probably not very nice on the telephone, somebody came out and they managed to find it right away. And I think that experience that I have is probably not the most frustrating of the experiences that all of my constituents have had, but it pretty much captures what goes on a lot of time, is that there's not a lot of customer service until finally, you have to elevate and engage all of these people in the county council and your state delegates, and it just shouldn't have to be that way. And I think that's the frustration that people have. And some of the things I hear about frequently, people are concerned about coordination of activities between the city and WSSC and the county, and I know that our city is pretty active about that, and I think that a lot of that has gotten better, which is good. But the coordination between when we're doing our road repair and then when the water mains come up is one. Information about when water is going to be out. Frequently the water just gets shut off and people don't know. This happened most recently on Flower Avenue when it was shut off because they were going to come in and do the permanent patch, which was great. But it also would have been great if people knew, so that they maybe could have planned and had some bottles of water. I mean, some of it is just as basic as that. And I understand that it's the contractor's job to do that. But at some point, from our perspective, we think it's WSSC's job to make sure that it happens. And so telling us that it's the contractor's job doesn't really make people feel any better about it. Contractor behavior is an ongoing problem. Where they park their vehicles, they frequently park their vehicles in illegal places. They really like to park them on Boyd and Lincoln along Carroll Avenue, which causes a crazy traffic pattern because nobody will wait. So if someone's waiting to get into one of these streets where it's only wide enough for one car, these cars keep going around them on Carroll, and they end up going head-on into the other lane. And it makes an incredibly dangerous situation, and they do it repeatedly. And then I call the police chief, and I ask him to go out and ticket him, and he goes out and talk to them and say, okay, we won't do it. And then the next time it's another contractor or it's another vehicle, and we have to go through this process all the time. And we as the city, that's a huge thing for us to manage, and I think it would be better if WSSC held their contractors accountable for that kind of behavior. And I know their public works director has been calling WSSC and asking you to do that, and it's getting better, and so we're happy about that, but it is still can be a problem. So thank you for what you've done so far. Dumping debris sort of randomly in the street or on people's prized flower beds is annoying. I know it's public right-of-way, but if you have a choice of where to dump things, they'd rather you dump them in the street or maybe on their grass and try not to dump them on the flower beds and the azaleas. It's kind of back to just kind of paying attention to what's going on in the community and having a little bit of courtesy. Running idling vehicles all the time, I think that's actually against the law, but we have a lot of contractors who leave their vehicles idling all the time. When Elm was being redone, that happened a lot. The vehicle would be idling all day long, and the people would come out and complain, and they'd say, well, it's a diesel engine, and it takes a long time for this or that to happen, but we don't really care. We don't want you to idle the vehicles in the neighborhood all day long. We're trying to keep up with broken curbs. There's one now on Boyd, which is right where they parked the giant, whatever they call it, a backhoe. There's a 5-year-old boy. I know we'd know what it was, but I don't know what it is. You know, they had parked it there every day, and it's got a cracked curb. And you know, they're long gone, and the street repairs are there, and my cracked curb is still there. And the patches that we get are also often poor patches, especially if they come on a heavily used street like Ethan Allen or Flower Avenue. Those are usually the worst. And I already said kind of what I wanted to say about WSSC response. Shouldn't take the call to the county council or to our state delegates to get action. And we would like WSSC to take responsibility for the work that is WSSC's and not to deny responsibility for what happens and make homeowners go through these outrageous processes to try to get compensation for repairs that were clearly caused by the contractor. We had that as a recent case that we had, and after calling the county council, Urban's office, we got a fairly quick resolution. But again, it was really obvious that that was what it was, and it just shouldn't take that. So I would say, you know, don't deny responsibility for the things that are WSSC's responsibility, and don't pass the buck to the contractors, because it's really frustrating to us. Other than that, I think people look forward to coordinating around how we improve these miles and miles of 80-year-old water pipe. I think people are reasonable. They know it's going to be inconvenient, and I think they look forward to working with WSSC in partnership to reduce the inconveniences and get things done in a way that makes sense for everybody. So I want to thank you for coming tonight and sitting in the hot seat. Thank you.
The hot seat's on? Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come hear firsthand what your concerns are and give us some specific information. I really appreciate, Council Member, what you said, and you know, as I sat there listening to you talk about the customer service and coordination and not having to wait until it's at a council member or an elected official, other elected official's office before we do something. You know, if that's a perception, I can't tell you that how that grieves me, because that is not what we're about. You know, we know that you entrust us to provide safe, clean water every day and to provide the wastewater services. And if we've got to get out and do this huge reconstruction challenge that we have, that we coordinate and we do it, we listen to your concerns and we provide you the information. And it certainly does seem from what I'm hearing right now is that either we truly are not doing that, or we have not communicated well enough, so you know, the perception is there. And I know that you've given me some real examples, so obviously there are some problems. Before I go any further, let me introduce members. I've got members of the senior staff with me. So first of all, I'm Teresa Daniel, and I'm the interim general manager at WSSC. Rudy Chow was the interim deputy general manager. Our chief engineer, Gary Gum. And Hak Kwan is the group leader for Customer Care West, who does, under which Tacoma Park, you know, has most of the maintenance and the work done. John White is from the Communications Office, Director of Public Affairs. Is that your correct title, John? I'm sorry. Public Affairs Manager, jack of all trades, taking notes. Everybody's taking notes, actually. And then Gene Williams just walked in. He is in our Intergovernmental Relations Office as a Government Relations Manager. So again, I appreciate the opportunity. What I'd like to do, if you don't mind, is sort of put some things in perspective, maybe tell you some things you already know, but at least it acknowledges for you all that I recognize that as well. And then I wanted to take a couple of minutes and have the chief engineer and a group leader talk about the process for planned work and also for emergency work. Earlier in the week, I met with the director of Public Works, and we talked about part of the frustration, we think, is that you just don't know what our process is. You know, a complaint will, you know, somebody will complain that, gosh, they're back again for the third time digging in the same place. Can that be right? Well, actually, it is correct. But if you don't know that, it looks like we're just back, you know, messing around again, or redoing some work, or it just isn't clear to you what's going on. Or we had someone earlier say, when will the work on Sherman Road, is it Sherman Avenue, be finished? Well, we should be communicating that to you, so you at least have some idea, and then continuing to update you. But at any rate, let me just sort of put some things into perspective. We already mentioned that of the almost 36 miles of underground infrastructure in Tacoma Park, 36% of those miles are 80 years old or more. So you truly have an aging infrastructure problem in your city. And if you look at either of the maps displayed up here, that gives you a sense of where it is, and a legend that tells you what hasn't been touched, what has been cleaned and lined, and we're going to have to come back and replace that at some point. The cleaning and lining is to extend the life at least somewhat. And then what we've done since about, I think it's 2008, and what's currently going on, and then what's planned. Since 1998, we've replaced about 9 miles of your almost 36 miles of underground infrastructure. And for the remainder of 2009 and 10, we've got 0.6 miles scheduled right now. And we know that there have been a lot of problems, and we're hearing that have arisen in your neighborhoods and on your streets as we've done the work. And we are concerned about the problems that you have been experiencing with our reconstruction and our repair projects. You know, also there's been 42 leaks or breaks in Tacoma Park since December of 2007. And although it may not feel like it to you, the leaks have actually been decreasing. They have not been increasing. In fact, the highest number you had was in the year 2000. There were about 60 leaks. But even though they haven't been increasing, they have not been decreasing at an accelerated rate. So currently what you're experiencing is about 25 to 30 breaks or leaks a year. Well, that's still a lot. And so that tells you that even though we've been in your neighborhoods for about the last 10 years, one of our experts who's been out working with you said, yeah, we've been all over them for the last 10 years. Those poor people. So, you know, my folks recognize that. But we're going to be with you for a little bit longer because we really have to replace the aging infrastructure. So I guess you knew that. I think you knew that. But let me acknowledge that there's still work to do. Now, the last 3 years, we've had about 4 different contractors working on the repair and the reconstruction work, the replacement work. And a couple of them were pretty good. I would even say excellent. There was another one that had some problems, but was at least marginally satisfactory. And then we had one that was completely unsatisfactory. We were completely unsatisfied with. There were all kinds of problems, and I think most of what I may hear tonight from you, if you talk about some of the problems that you've seen, came from that one contractor, I'm sad to say. And it took us a while. We were the victim of our own process. We didn't have a lot of teeth to the evaluation program that we had in place. So one of the things that we've improved is we have an evaluation process for our contractors, and we actually are going to solicit feedback from your Director of Public Works and the Mayor so that we can have your input that will be part of the final evaluation of the contractors that are out in your neighborhoods. And if they don't do a satisfactory job, if they were unsatisfactory in their job performance, then we're going to suspend them from working with us. And the intent is it should motivate them, if they want to continue working for us and for you, that their work will be at least satisfactory. That'll be one of the... when Daryl and we met earlier in the week, one of the things we talked about as an improvement to what we currently do is that she or one of her staff designated will come to our pre-construction meetings so that they can talk about the things that the city expects. And I think some of the things you were talking about, Councilwoman, we can tell them the expectation for idling their vehicles, where they can or can't dump things, coordinating with people. Some of the things that I think that you listed, I think, are some of the things that Daryl has in mind that she wants to make sure is brought up at the pre-construction meeting, and that's not something we've done before, so I think that'll be an improvement. And then just the idea of better information. You know, we send letters to residents saying this is what we'll be doing in your neighborhoods, but I don't think we give a lot of detail. One of the things we want to do is provide these kinds of brochures to you that explain the process. And if you haven't picked one up, please do. There are some at the table over there, which at least gives you a pretty good idea of what the process is for planned work. And one of the things we talked about, too, is that we need to put more complete information about what we're doing on our website and on the city website and continue to exchange that information. I was talking a little bit earlier with one of you who said, well, okay, and I don't like to get on computers, and I don't know how to do that. So if there's another way to get me information, that would be preferable. And that's fine, too. There are many avenues, of course, to use to get information out. So any ideas you have that we can incorporate, we're looking for that as well. One thing we do which will certainly help for emergency kinds of work, is we have a customer notification system, which we started a couple of months ago, John? About 3 months ago. You have to sign up for it, and basically what we'll do is we'll text you or email you, however you sign up, when there's a break or a leak in your neighborhood, and it'll give you, one tells you that it's going on, so you get notification that the water is going to be turned off, about how long you can expect that to be without service, or expect that we'll be out there working. And you can ask for that information in your neighborhoods where you live, or where you work, or where your children go to school, so that you may want to know not only for your home information, but for information where you're traveling. And there's a little yellow card that talks about that if you want to take a look at it, or you can talk to John and he'll give you a lot more information on that as well. So I know that that doesn't fix the problems that you've just experienced in the last couple of years. I realize that. That's the history, and we can't do anything to correct that, but we can at least take lessons learned from it and any other information that you give us tonight and go forward and do better. And that's our promise here tonight. What I'd like to do then for just a couple more minutes, and then I really just want to listen to you, is ask our chief engineer to talk to you about the process of planned work. That may answer some of the questions you already have. So now you know going forward, this is what to expect when there's work, there are reconstructions, what I mean by the planned work. And then Hawk will talk a little bit about the process when there's emergency work. That is, we didn't plan it, but there was a leak or there was a break and we have to come out and repair. So let me go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Gum.
Thank you, Teresa. Does everybody have one of these? John, could you make sure everybody gets one of these while I'm doing a little prelude? I want to go through this for the construction phase, but before I do that, I'd like to talk to you about how we pick projects. The pipes are breaking. Pipes are old. The pipes are in corrosive ground. Some of them are made out of cast iron. Other pipes are made out of concrete, the bigger ones. There's ductile iron pipes. There's all these different things that contribute towards how we go about picking the pipes that need to be replaced. Most people think it's based on age, and that clearly is a big factor. But you know what the biggest factor is? It's where the pipes are breaking. And where they're breaking frequently and recently. If there was a lot of breaks 10 years ago, but it seems to be not the case anymore, then that area is not as high as ones that are breaking more frequently in recent years. That's the areas where we were picking jobs to do. That is a factor, though. I mean, what's related to that is the age of the pipe, and so the fact that there are a lot of older pipes in this area is one of the reasons why we've been doing projects in this area for quite a while. And if you look at this map, if you haven't done that prior to leaving, you might want to take a look. You'll see that there's a lot more pipes that have not been replaced. And those will be replaced more than likely in your lifetime. So we are not done in Tacoma Park in picking projects. There is somewhat of a reprieve. We only have 2 projects planned in the next several years, and they're located on the site plan there. Now, by now, hopefully everybody has one of these. When we pick a project and we get into the design of it, we coordinate with Tacoma Park, the town of Tacoma Park, and let them know we're going to, be looking to do this job. And at that time, we decide with Tacoma Park whether there ought to be, a public meeting where we would come into the area here and probably in this very building. And talk about this project. Sometimes that's done, sometimes it isn't. But even when it is, not everybody knows about the project, because not everybody comes to that meeting. Or even if they do, the night of that meeting, the thought was this project would start at a certain date, and it doesn't always happen at that date. So one of the challenges that we have, and we don't do it very well after that first coordination, is continually letting everybody know what the changes are. So we need to improve that. And that's my challenge to do with my staff. But let's say we do all that, and you still don't happen to be at any of those meetings and you don't know. If you would turn to page 2 of this brochure, if you see out in front of your streets or any streets near you where you're driving by and you start seeing these colored lines painted, on the street and on the sidewalks and sometimes even in the grass areas, that's an indication that somebody's getting ready to do something. And if it's as extensive as it appears in this picture, it's probably us. And if you want to know whether it is or not, there's phone numbers in here to call. And feel free to do that. Say, hey, I see these markings on the street. Does this mean what I think it means? Are you getting ready to come? And we should be able to tell you yes or no. Somebody's coming. And it might not be us, but a good chance is that it will be us. On page 3, when this project is getting ready to go, there should be a sign like that. And there ought to be numbers on there. Should be able to tell you exactly who my staff is that's going to be managing that construction contractor. And you should be able to get satisfaction from calling those people. To hear that you don't and you have to go, I mean, I don't like it when anybody calls my boss. Because, you know, and sure enough, we'll get involved in it, and chances are we're going to get it fixed. I prefer not to have to do it that way. Actually, I would prefer, if my staff's not satisfying you, I wish you'd call me. My number's not in here. But if you would like my number, I'll be more than happy to give you my card. And I guarantee you that if you call me, you won't need to call your councilwoman or your councilman or anybody else. We'll get it fixed. It may not always go exactly the way you would like, but it will be resolved. Because you shouldn't have to call me. The fact that you have to call anybody else other than that number is totally unacceptable.
But you're going to give us your card anyway.
I am, because I'd rather you call me than my boss, or have somebody else calling my boss. Some people, I mean, I don't know, on pages 4 and 5 it just shows you where our level of work is. That red line and to the right is our area of where we're going to be working. It's not always clear where that red line is. It's not a red line marked on the ground. It's often something that the property owner doesn't even know. And it does cause some consternation. You heard earlier, the contractor apparently is dumping probably base course materials on flower beds. Those flower beds are more, they better be in the right of way, because if they're on your private property, they have a different problem. Chances are it is out in the public right of way, and but it is certainly true that you have many places to pick. You don't have to pick the azalea bush necessarily. And likewise, you wouldn't expect them to put it on your driveway either, so you can't get in your driveway at night. So that actually is a reasonable expectation, that they don't have to go out of their way to make you miserable. And our contractors need to be smarter than that. But our work tends to be right there. It'll be in your yard, and it goes right out into the street. It could be your driveway, it could be your sidewalk, and it's definitely going to probably be your road. That's where most of our stuff is. When construction begins, you're going to see signs, you're going to see traffic diverted in some cases. You're going to see these lines laying along the ground. That's actually water lines. Those water lines are actually going to run to your house, because most of the time our water main jobs replace the pipes right where they are. That means the one you're already hooked up to is in the way. So to keep providing you water, we have to put these temporary things there. And some of you probably have some consternation. Why does it take long? Why do these folks disappear over the winter time? The reason they do that is because of this. If they were to do this in the winter and leave these lines exposed above the ground like that, they would freeze, and then you wouldn't have any water. So these folks shut down over the winter time. And that's why they disappear for months on end and come back when it's warmer. When we're done, people complain about the water. We should be telling you, and if you keep this thing, this does tell you, when it's done, you should run your water a little bit, because clearly if there is any kind of material in your line, either your own line in your home or even our lines, shutting the water off, turning it back on again, can stir up some things that have settled down, and it takes a little while for that to clear up. That's why it's always a good idea, when your water has not been in service constantly, that as it comes back on, you turn it on for a little while. And I heard something about people are not knowing when the water is going to be shut off. That also is unacceptable. If you read in here, you'll see that you're supposed to get notice. Not 10 seconds notice, not after the fact notice, but in advance notice. And if that's not happening, that needs to be, that we need to hear about that too. Because, I mean, that's probably, in my opinion, that's worse than the flower beds. I mean, you need your water. And then when we're done, another thing that sometimes doesn't go well is the restoration. The curbs, the driveways, the sidewalks, the grass, and then ultimately the paved streets. Now, we do something a little bit different than other places that I have been, and I actually think it's a better practice, but the coordination makes it tricky, and if it doesn't work all the time well, it does have its downside. My experience has been that construction contractors are not particularly good at restoring streets, restoring driveways, and grass. And so we don't put that final restoration on our construction contractors. We actually have other contractors that we hire that are expert in those fields. And then we try to get them to come in at the right time to do that restoration work. So you won't see the construction contractor, the one being, when are we going to get my yard reestablished? It won't be that guy. It's another one that we're bringing in after this is done to come in and put your yard back in order. And there are issues associated with it. Occasionally, if the timing's not right, we're not going to probably restore your yard, at the end of July and into August. We're probably going to wait for the, to get cooler into the fall when we try to restore that yard. The biggest thing that I've heard from Tacoma Park and other places in the short time that I've been with WSSC are the roads. We do have the construction contractor reestablish what we call a temporary patch each day. That's cold patch. It's not the best material, and it is certainly temporary in nature. We have that same construction contractor is responsible normally to do what we call a permanent patch. I don't like that term, but it is the term that we use. I don't like the term permanent because it isn't supposed to be permanent. But it is a fairly long, intermediate time frame that's there because the final product, the mill and overlay, won't be done until, one, the weather's right. We won't be doing that when it's cold. And two, when the job is done so we can get it done. And we need to make sure that the compactive effort that the contractor did was done correctly. If we were to come in too early with the final paving and he did not do that correctly, then it would just fail and we'd be back again. So we do let that go a little while before we come in with the pro and do the final job. Now, one of the problems in Tacoma Park recently was we did have a bad contractor. He wasn't doing the permanent patching. It was getting close to winter time. We ended up having to pull that work away from him and bring in a paver to come in and do that part of the job, but that's not the norm. And that's you heard from Teresa that we did have this one bad contractor, and we ended up having to do that. And that's sort of the way this goes. An overview of the process, and certainly when we conclude and you have questions, we can go into that in more detail, I suppose.
Good evening. Again, my name is Hak Kwon, and Customer Care West group leader. I'm in charge of the Tacoma Park and Bethesda, Chevy Chase, and Silver Spring southern part of Montgomery County. I'm basically a maintenance person. The people I work with are responding your water main break and sanitary sewer overflows. I don't have any plan, and when you have a water main break or a sanitary overflow, we have to respond right away, right time. Unless we have 20, 30 water main breaks a day, then we have to decide based on what's the impact on your safety, meaning human beings or street or structures, what is the impact on your living cycles and living standard, and what is the size of a pipe. So we make a determination based on those kind of impacts. But otherwise, if less than 5 water main break, then we come out response right away, we repair the water main. Usually how it happens, when water main breaks, either residents or policemen or fire department call our emergency call center, and then they will dispatch our inspector out, and then we confirm the water main break. They will send our maintenance crew and repair the water main. And once water main is done, then we have a temporary patch on the street, and then we actually basically walked away, and then we give it to the different department to make a permanent patch. So that's how our work is processed. And again, I know that I heard a couple of issues about the maintenance issues that the maintenance is doing the right time in the early time, but we do as fast as we can, and whenever there is an emergency, and then especially when it's the sanitary sewer overflow, and that's the first priority that we are doing it, and we dispatched our crew right away. So again, that's our part of the involvement in the maintenance.
Yeah, I just want to expand a little bit on the inspection of any emergency type of work. Our goal, WSSC's goal, is to respond to those emergencies within 2 hours. That means generally we'll dispatch an inspector, like Hawk said, to assess the condition, to ensure, one, exactly when does this job has to go. If it's causing, say, for example, property damages, or someone's home's being flooded and so on, all that obviously carry a higher emergency rating factor. And we have limited resources, meaning our crews. We cover 1,000 square miles within the 2 counties, and so we spread out quite thinly among all the emergency that we have to respond to. But the goal is, like I said, to respond to all inspections within 2 hours. That's generally what the first line of defense is. We'll get a quick assessment, then the information will come back to the group leader, and they will make accordingly calls as far as which job has to go first and so on. And also, like I said, water main is important. Broken water main is an issue for us. However, sanitary sewer overflow, that is a priority number 1 for us, because that causes environmental damages and so on, all that. But generally, if we get a sanitary sewer overflow, that job will go immediately. There's prioritization, it'll jump right to the top. So.
Okay. Well, I hope that we've maybe answered some questions already with what we've said, and that we're a little bit reassured from the comments that you've heard. I ask you to accept my personal apology for the unacceptable service. We take very seriously that what we do, our mission, is a public health and public safety job. And what I ask now is that you just watch us improve our service to you, and let us know if we haven't made the mark yet. So now I'd like to just open it up, if you don't mind, and if you have any other questions or any other concerns or any other stories that you need to tell us so that we can take note.
We actually have a podium set up here, and we have a microphone that we can move around as well. So
You got your choice as to whether you want to go to the podium or we can bring you a microphone.
I'll go to the podium. Thanks very much, Mayor Williams and Heather Missouri for calling this meeting. Thank you, Ms. Daniel, and the team for showing up. I appreciate that. Evening's a precious time, and I appreciate your being here. My name is Richard Harris. I lived in Tacoma Park for almost 23 years, and I just wanted to bring to your attention, I appreciate your comment about the public safety being foremost, because I think that the construction projects that are going on right now continue to be a significant and severe public health hazard. And I, for many years, have commuted by bicycle. I take my daughter to school on my bicycle, and it is evident to me that the people who do the road work think about, is this acceptable for a Humvee or something like that? And as long as a Humvee can get over it, it's okay. And let me tell you that today, I presume none of you came here by bicycle, but if you did, you would have found that the roads, as the WSSC contractor have left them, are actually extremely hazardous for bicycle right now. There's some very basic things, and I'm not going to harangue you, but I do want to let you know a couple of things I've observed, and maybe you can put your attention to them. One thing is that sometime early last spring, your contractor dug up Grant Avenue, which is a main commuting route for children to the local schools, and my daughter and me on my bicycle, my daughter and I on my bicycle, found that the roads were, we understand you have to fix the pipes. You did it actually pretty effectively on our street, but Grant Avenue was a real nightmare to traverse on the bicycle throughout last spring. And when the summer came, I thought, thank goodness they will finally be able to fix Grant Avenue. And when we're back in the fall, there's no question that the incredibly rough and difficult and dangerous patches that are on that road will have been resolved and the road will have been repaved. Well, guess what? We got back in the fall, and even though the underground work had been done, the roads were still in execrable condition. And it was finally, I don't remember exactly, but it was October or November or something of this year, that your secondary contractor finally came in and put acceptable patches on those roads. Right now, Carroll Avenue is an extreme severe hazard, and it is because, again, I understand you have to dig up the road to get to the pipes, and I completely sympathize with that, but the patches that are on there right now there are huge gaps around the steel plates that basically a bicycle could easily fall into, and a bicycle wheel could fall into, and some of those have been more recently patched. But there's still, every day there's a different hazard somewhere else. The major problem right now on Carroll Avenue is that the asphalt or the so-called asphalt that's being used as temporary patches is not actually asphalt at all. It seems to be gravel with a little bit of tar wrapped around it, but it's incredibly friable. I brought some of the patch for you to enjoy. It's actually, this is the patch. It's actually tarry gravel. It doesn't actually stick to the road, and as cars go over it, the gravel just comes up. And so not only do we have to dodge steel plates, but the reality is that the gravel that's left on the road is an extreme hazard to bicycles. I don't know if you ride a bicycle at all, but that is one of the greatest hazards for bicyclists, trying to navigate through gravel. And so even if I can get around the patches and so on the road, the curb area is filled with this tarry gravel. I suggest you let your contractor know that such a thing as a broom exists. So when they're done making a patch, they can actually go, and well, they probably need a shovel too, to tell you the truth, but they can pick up this friable material and create a safe lane for bicycles. Ideally, I'd love your contractors to come through when they think they're done for the day and ride a bicycle up and down these roads to see if they can actually navigate it without killing themselves. I'm concerned for my own personal safety, obviously, and the safety of my daughter. And I think that this is, part of Tacoma Park's ethos, of course, is one of being green and being progressive and so on. And one of we're right now in this city talking about what our standards are for the city's sort of overarching goals. And the number one goal right now is for the city to be sustainable. And to be sustainable, it has to be acceptable for bicycles. To be acceptable for bicycles, there should not be tons of gravel on the road. And so it's a simple fix. I bring it to you and ask that you do that. That's my main point. I have one side point, which perhaps you could shed some light on, which is part of my bicycle route after I drop my daughter off and go to work, takes me right across the line between Tacoma Park and into the District of Columbia. And for weeks and weeks and weeks in the middle of the winter, I passed that point, and right at the line, exactly on the dividing line as far as I could tell, there was a water leak. And I couldn't tell, is this Maryland, is this DC? And obviously, well, I'm guessing that the officials were having the same comments in D.C. saying, oh, it must be in Maryland, and the Maryland people were saying it must be in D.C. But the result was that there was an enormous ice slick on Maple Avenue, which is a significant thoroughfare, that it was hard enough on cars, and it was truly a deadly hazard for bicycles there that persisted for a long time. I think the water leak is gone, at least the freezing weather has more or less gone. But I mean, that was, I would be curious to know how you deal with those issues that are right on jurisdiction lines, because my suspicion is that that was not addressed for a long time because nobody knew whose jurisdiction it was in. A unique problem, I know, for not something WSSC normally needs to worry about, but certainly we in Tacoma Park have to be concerned with these things. So anyhow, can I give you this gravel so you can take it? There's more actually out on the street you're welcome to take.
I'll take it.
Thank you.
My name's Ray Scannell, and I live up here on Park Avenue. And I'm glad you introduced that topic because it was on my list. I wasn't really planning on saying much, but I feel like somebody has to speak for the neighbors who had their torches and pitchforks ready to come tonight but were rained out. I thank you for coming. It's a heroic thing for you to do. And I want you to know that for every one of us that's here, there's probably 10 or 20 people who are, or 50, who hate you. You know, I don't want to mount the flag catchers, but as Tom Wolfe once said, but WSSC, I think, in this community vies with Pepco for being the most hated public utility. And it's because of what is perceived as incompetence and arrogance. Incompetence is one thing. Arrogance compounds it. And to give you some examples of incompetence specifically, years back, when we were in the middle of a drought, I had a swamp in my backyard with, you know, cattails and everything. Now that obviously wasn't natural since it was a drought. So I called WSSC twice. They came out and tested the water. The third time they came out, it was at the behest of Public Works, because even Public Works couldn't believe what I was going through. Every time WSSC came out and tested the water, they never told me what the answer was. I would have to call them and chase them and, you know, and make phone calls until finally somebody would say, oh, we tested it, it's not our water. Now, it's a drought, it's my backyard. Who else's water is it going to be? So come fall, my neighbor gets his quarterly bill, and it's like for a gargantuan amount of money, and it turns out that he's got a water line leak. And his water line has been leaking all summer, and because of the particular topography of our yards, it was leaking into my backyard, and I had a swamp of WSSC water. Who else's water would it be? And WSSC's response was, that's not our water. And then when he spent the money to fix his water line, WSSC's response was, well, it's his water line. It's your water. And I never did hear what about the third test, because at that point the water line was replaced. Now, that's ridiculous. It's your water, just because it's going into his house. And we've all got old water lines, I understand, you know, and I've replaced both my sewer line and my water line over the last 15 years. I understand that it's our responsibility to do that, but it's your water, and nobody from WSSC was capable of figuring out that it was WSSC water, even though we were in the middle of drought. That's one example. Another example related to that is when we replaced our sewer line, the contractor who did it, you know, went to the curb, said, your sewer is going to back up sometime in the next 10 years. And I was not happy about that, since we had just replaced the sewer line. And he said, yeah, because the WSSC pipe at the junction where your sewer line goes in is coming down, is collapsing. And sooner or later it's going to just block off your sewer line and it's going to back up into your basement. And I said, well, what do we do about that? And he said, well, nothing. You can call WSSC, but they won't do anything about it until it collapses and backs up into your basement. So I called WSSC and I said, my contractor says the sewer line is collapsing and is going to back up into my basement sometime in the next 10 years. And the basic answer I got was, call us in 10 years. Now, you know, those are just personal observations. I would take one exception to what you said, which is that I don't think a Humvee would be happy on Carroll Avenue right now. I invite you all, when you go home tonight, to drive to the corner of Carroll Avenue and Tulip Avenue, which is a mile that way, less than a mile that way, maybe half a mile. And you will find, I worked back in the day as a kid on the coal patch crew. We called it the full employment crew because we were going back and patching the same holes every couple of weeks during the summer. And so I understand that coal patch is a temporary fix. But I was watching those guys throw that coal patch on there. I could have done a better job when I was 17. They threw coal patch into the deep holes. They had done the original patching job. It sunk. The Humvees and everybody else were rumbling down the street. Their axles were, you know, flying all over the place. The bicyclists were zigzagging madly in and out of traffic, which is an exciting event for everybody. I was driving my car trying to figure out, am I better off riding with one tire in the slit or both tires out of the slit? If I was both tires out of the slit, I was in oncoming traffic. It was a real adventure. It is a real adventure. So then your guys came out and threw the coal patch on. So you know what we have now? We have piles of gravel that are incomplete so that when you hit the pile of gravel, you can go rumbling across the pile of gravel and you watch it kicking out behind you as you run down the street. That's incompetence. The guys who put that coal patch down wouldn't have worked 2 weeks on my job when I was with the Highway Department in Huntington, Long Island in 1972. Yet they're your contractors. Okay? And the fact that those holes were in the road in the first place was because they had done a bad job putting down the permanent patch. So, contractor behavior is terrible. I mean, the fact that you can't control your contractors is mystifying. But, and patch is bad, and you've heard about that, and I'm seconding it. But there are other things, like your contractors put their signs up so that it's inevitable that bicyclists have to zigzag out into the street. I almost hit one the other day because he was going around a street sign which was blocking the aisle that bikes typically use. What was that about? It's dangerous for pedestrians, it's dangerous for drivers, it's dangerous for bicyclists. I'll leave it at that. It's not the contractor's problem. It's your problem. When we call and we say, when we hear that the contractor, well, we have a problem with we don't have a problem with the contractor. You have a problem with the contractor. And you have a problem with us because of your contractors. And the guys who are out there now are lousy contractors. If that's the quality of work that's acceptable, God knows what was unacceptable. When we call WSSC, now this may have changed since last summer. I think it was June, we kept losing water every couple of days. I felt like I was living in a third world country. I'm right outside the capital of the free world, and we've got no water, on and off for weeks. We call WSSC and we get nothing. You know, calling is a waste of time. Calling the numbers are a waste of time. I notice on the brochure you have a phone number. That's good. Where's the website? When we call, if you get through, oftentimes the folks who answer the phone have no idea what's going on. Or they give you the wrong information. You know, it'll be done at 2. You call back at 2. It's not done. It'll be done at 4. You call back at 4. It's not done. You call back at 8. Call back at midnight. It's still not done. I understand that there are communications problems, but if you're expecting us as citizens to be patient with you, you have to give us real information. You need to coordinate with our city better. You need to coordinate with the other utilities better. It's really frustrating to have one utility come up and tear up your street, get it repaved, and then have you guys come in behind them and tear up the street again. This happened all over town over the last 10 years. I've lived here 23 years, and I've watched Pepco and WSSC and sometimes Washington Gas come up and tear up the same street in sequence, and then each one of you pays to have it repaved, and then you come and tear it up. I don't even know who's responsible for what the condition of the intersection of Carroll and Flower, and that stretch down the hill there. I mean, that's a real adventure. Is that you? Is that Pepco? Is it Washington Gas? Who knows? That is a real nightmare for people with Humvees. So I'm just going to stop there because I'm starting to get worked up. Your process should not be opaque. Thank you for the brochure. I appreciate that. How come I had to come here to get it? Planning should not result in repeat return visits. And one last point. Yes, we have 80-year-old pipe in this town, but as I recall, the pipe that blew up, was it on River Road or the one that blew up in Durwood and flooded, was a 40-year-old pipe. From what I understand, talking to my county council person, you have problems with 30-year-old pipes. You suing the guys who sold you the rotten pipes? Thank you.
I'll be a little more tender. Just as loud and boisterous, but a little more tender. I really appreciate, I do appreciate WSSC, and I think I said that before. Without you all, we wouldn't have any water service. I mean, but this little last bit of business was an interesting journey for sure. I did not have the same issues on Sherman Avenue that Council Member Clay had because I was on the street every day from the minute the contractor got there until they closed down, and making sure that they didn't put the dirt on the flower beds. I just was there. I communicated with them. I said, and this was your bad contractor. I know who it was. It was the one that walked off the job, for sure. They did, I got to say, they did clean work. They cleaned up every day. I told them where they should park their vehicles. And, not on Sherman Avenue because that's where the people park. They would park them down where the people didn't park. So, and they did what I asked. I'm maybe, where's the mayor? They actually, did do what I asked them to do. And we had a good relationship. That's what I started out to do, was create a relationship with them and see if we could work something out for my street. And when they were going to turn the water off, I emailed everybody. I said, tell me, give me 48 hours. These people need to know if they're not going to have any water at 7:30 in the morning, they need to take their shower the night before, or they need to have something they can pour on their bodies. And they did that every time. So, and again, I know it was the one that walked off the job. And the other part is, Gary, I think I called you because maybe one of your folks on the street, I flagged down a WSSC truck. I wasn't messing around. If I need something to happen, I'm going to go sit on somebody's desk. It's just going to, probably not in the beautiful building out there any longer, but I'm going to go find some way to get in there. And you had me call Jeff, who is your concrete guy, or your the street fixing person, because I knew in October that if we didn't get our street, which, oh, by the way, even a Humvee couldn't go down because it was all plates. If we didn't get that street fixed pretty darn quick, we weren't going to have any street fixed for the whole winter. Because I know a little bit about asphalt. There's a point when it can't be made any longer, and it can't be put on the ground any longer, and it won't happen. So that's when I called Daryl, and then I called Dan Robinson, and I called Mayor Williams, and because they have much more clout than me, and they said, they may have given me numbers, and I started calling you all, and somehow they and I got Sherman Avenue fixed. I don't even drive up Carroll Avenue now, so that's why when you said, I said something about Carroll Avenue, I go Maple. I don't mess with Carroll. It's not worth the problem. But that was our issue. Now, I'll do it again. I'll establish a relationship with whoever's working on the street so I can tell my people, at least the people on my street, and the people in SS Carroll, because that's who I also represent, is the SS Carroll Neighborhood Association. Because I knew Grant Avenue was a real rotten mess. I mean, it was even almost worse than Sherman, I believe. So was Lincoln. And it went on and on and on. I guess the other thing, the communication. The letter went out, but it went out like a year ago. I may be wrong about the year, but I don't think so. I think I'm right on. Because every time I'd see the little guys in the little truck drive up and down the street, I'd run out and go, okay, when are you all going to tear up the street? When's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? And they go, oh, don't worry, don't worry. I mean, the 4th of July is coming. We have the big picnic. I don't want, we need to plan around this mess. And, but I think it was a good year. And then there was not another bit of information. I could have missed it, but I'm pretty nosy. So you all can rest assured I probably didn't. And then as soon as the signs went up, I went and grabbed the Randy Windsor notice, and kept everybody as communicated with as possible. I guess the contractor put the no parking signs up on June the 9th at I guess 10 o'clock in the morning, saying that on June the 9th at 7 a.m. there'd be no parking on the street. That doesn't really work for people. We need a day or two notice about, we all had to move, and then they didn't show up. They didn't show up for like probably 2 to 3 weeks. We all moved our cars every morning. Every night we parked someplace else, and then for 3 weeks nothing happened. And once it did happen, then I was tight with them to see what was going to happen, because I could see that maybe we had a teeniest little communication problem. And then the other one is, once I got a hold of Mayor Williams and Darrell at Public Works, we were able to communicate, and you all said, Gary, I think it was your office, or Jeff, I think it was Jeff, who said when you guys would be out there, and then I prayed it would be a warm winter, because I know you all finished the job December the 3rd, it was a Friday, at 5 o'clock. I know exactly when it was. I knew that if it got below, 35 degrees, it wasn't going to happen. So we did get it done. I think Grant got theirs done, and so be it. It's the communication, I think, is paramount. My street was, even though it was a little icky during the whole process, they were pretty much, because I kept communicating with them and telling them to fill gallon jugs up. Just have it sitting beside, just in case you needed it to do whatever you needed to do for water if the water went off. We did have a couple of issues. Miss Utility, when she marks, sometimes she's not doesn't always mark exactly the right spot. So we had 2 gas lines cut on the corner of Hancock and Sherman. Twice, one big one, a huge one that required at least 7 or 10 fire trucks and police. It was pretty interesting. And then there was a smaller one that went to a house. My house was built in 1917. So I had, the last time you guys fixed it, you couldn't find the water main. It was so deep in the ground. It wasn't on your plans, because Sherman Avenue is a pretty old street. But other than that, I know that it's Gary, right? What's your last name? Gum, like chewing. Oh, got it.
Yes.
That's not the first time you've heard that either.
No.
You want it to be the last.
It won't be.
It won't be. But Gary said that we probably will get the mill and the repave by August. Is that right?
No, not the mill and the overlay.
Not the overlay, but the concrete.
The job will be done. Yeah.
But the concrete on the sidewalk.
Yeah, that should be done.
By August, all right, because there's just huge black patches all over and if you're a skateboarder, it doesn't work. So you need, that's not what I'm kidding about that, but it's just, if you want to have a garden, you don't want to, in the front, you don't want to redo it, because once those concrete guys get there, they don't care. I mean, they get onto anything. The other thing about the contractor, I told everybody when they were coming, and we were able to dig our gardens up and put them in containers. I mean, I really appreciated that kind of service. It was probably to get me away from them, but it still worked. I mean, whatever works, I'll do whatever it takes to get the job, to make it better for the street. And I've lived on that street since 1946, so it's a couple of years. It's a long time, and I know it was the original concrete. I saw what those guys had to go through maybe 2 feet of concrete just to get down into the hole. You could have set an apartment up on the corner of Grant, or on the corner of Hancock and Sherman, the huge hole. I've never seen anything so big. It was like a tunnel. So I had a good old time watching it go down. But again, I thank you all. I thank you all for being here. And I'm sure it's going to continue to be an experience when we've got 36 miles and we've only done 9. There's a few miles to go, 27. And that was, since 98, only 9 miles. And it's 11 years later, so it's I guess, a long and tedious process. And we're just one of the communities they have to deal with in this area. So again, thank you for your time. Thank you for explaining. And I do appreciate, your hard work. Thanks.
My name is Sabrina Barron. I live on Ethan Allen Avenue, and I'll thank you also for coming out this evening. And I'll echo a lot of what my fellow residents have said this evening. A couple of my particular pet peeves are being told the water is off and being told that the water is going to be back on by 5 o'clock in the morning, and then getting up and trying to get ready to go to work to find out that, lo and behold, the water has not come back on at 7 o'clock in the morning, and that there is no good explanation for why we got that notice and why the service was not then restored at that point in time. And then the repairs to the streets. Humvee, armored personnel carrier, Sherman tank, doesn't even come close to it. It's appalling, and it's been that way for absolutely years. And my street, Ethan Allen, is not nearly as bad as Carroll and Flower and Sherman and Boyd, the other streets that you're hearing about. What happens on my street are that utility trenches get dug across the street, and then they get repaired with coal patch, and there's never anything more permanent that's done, and the coal patch sinks over and over and over again, depending on the weather. And, our bedrooms in the front of the house, trucks hit those in the middle of the night, wide awake. There you go. And it just seems to me, like that guy who's constantly rolling the rock up the hill in hell, and it falls down, he has to roll it up again. Why there can't be some, at least more long-term solution to those kinds of things. And then the question of your contractors. When one of those utility trenches was being dug across my street, I stood in my front yard and watched your contractor back a backhoe through my neighbor's fence next door, when I had told the guy that the backhoe was right against the fence and he needed to watch what he was doing. And he just went right ahead and backed the backhoe through my neighbor's fence and knocked the fence down. The fence was eventually put back up, but it seems to me that that's a little bit of wasted effort and money. When somebody's standing there telling you you've got your backhoe against the fence, don't back through the fence, the guy does it anyway. Marginally satisfactory. I'm a teacher. I evaluate people all the time. Marginally satisfactory. That strikes me as not satisfactory at all. And I'll echo a lot of Ray's comments about your contractors. This is the level of your contracting service. That's more than appalling. So I appreciate your dedication to the challenges that you face and your dedication to making these situations better. But I hope you do understand that the situations are terrible. And to my mind, it's needless. It doesn't have to be that way. Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I'm Josh Wright. I'm a city council member for Ward 1, which is a proportion of Carroll Avenue that you've heard a lot about this evening. I have two questions, 2 stories, and 2 statements. The first question has to do with street selection. So I'd like a little bit more detail about how you decide when you're going to decide, when you're going to do which streets? Is it just based on how leaks are happening, how old they are, what's happens there?
It has to do with, they look at all the maintenance records and everything from how they had to go out and go and flush the hydrants because of discoloration problems and things like that in the water. That's a factor. How old the pipes are is a factor. What they're made out of is a factor. But the break history is the biggest factor. So if there are frequent and near past breaks, that's the biggest thing that they're looking at. There are some things where there used to be breaks and repairs have been done over the years, and that was a bad area, and then that kind of put that problem to rest. It wasn't the whole stretch. But when you're seeing that they're happening more frequently and recent, then the feeling is that's not going to get any better. We need to tear that up. That's the biggest factor that goes into picking it.
So that's helpful. It sort of explains to me what happened around Carroll Avenue, because it sounds like someone's looking at a map, they're looking at statistics, and they're forgetting that these streets and pipes run through a community. So they make a decision on when they're going to do Carroll Avenue, and it happens that, okay, we're going to do a stretch of street that has shops on it, where their livelihood depends a great deal on foot traffic, and in particular, probably a third to half of their business happens between, October and Christmas. And so what do we have? We decide to do the project in the middle of the shopping season. We have backhoes parked in parking spaces where people would drive and then shop. So I think there needs to be something in the process where someone actually comes and walks around and thinks about what aspects are unique to this stretch of road, and consider when we do a project. Then the second question has to do with the patch inspection process, because we've heard a lot about Carroll Avenue, and Carroll Avenue would obviously be different. A patch there would obviously be different than, for example, Cedar or Tulip, which is much less heavily trafficked. So is there some process by which these patches and the work is regularly inspected, and is there any more inspection done for more heavily traveled roads than less heavily traveled roads?
Well, they're supposed to look at them all every day. So the more heavily trafficked roads will, I don't know that they're going to need to go there any more often, but they're going to be able to see right away that there's a problem there. But no, they're supposed to be looking at that every day. Both the contractor and my people are supposed to be doing that.
So perhaps the person who inspects Carroll Avenue has a problem with his glasses or his eyesight or something. I have two stories. One actually relates to your 7100 Maple Avenue story of what turned into an ice slick, basically. So I walked that way to work frequently, and it was in the spring. I thought, was there something? At first, I thought there was something wrong with the storm drain. There's a constant puddle there. Then it got iced, and then I said, oh, maybe it's frozen, and that's why this has happened. And then I actually talked to one of my constituents, and he said, oh, I call every month about this issue, and nothing's happened. I probably called for 2-3 years. There's been a slow leak there. And it wasn't until we brought it to the Public Works Director's attention, and then she sort of ran it up the chain that, I don't know, it was probably like 2-3 weeks later the thing got fixed. And now actually I was very surprised because the curb was first, blacktop was put in for the curb, which has happened in other places, and then it remains there for months or years. And then a week later, they actually came and fixed the curb with concrete. It's probably still setting now. So that, I think, speaks to the kind of inconsistency. And so why should a resident have to call, every month and have nothing happen, and then it gets run up the chain of command through the Public Works Director? So that's the story. And then the second story has to do with a constituent of mine. And again, I think it has to do with inconsistent service. I've spent a fair bit of time in business doing operations, and it's really all about consistency. It's almost more maddening. If you just were bad all the time, it would be easier in some ways, because it's more maddening when sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So this woman You know, in Tacoma Park, there's 2 zip codes. Everyone thinks it's 20912, but a few people actually, some portion of Tacoma Park is 20910. And somehow in your database, it was set up that, you know, it's pulling off some data feed that her address was actually a 20910 address when it wasn't. So she kept not getting her bill. And then her water kept getting shut off because she didn't even know that she wasn't getting her bill. She didn't know what was going on. And it's not a bill that comes every month, right? It's less frequently. So she would call customer service reps. They wouldn't be able to help her. Finally, you know, after calling probably 6 to 7 times, she gets this person who actually knows what they're doing, and in no time has actually solved the problem and figured out where she needs to go in the system. So that just made her, you know, she wanted to pull her hair out because she'd spent probably over the course of 4 or 5 months having multiple calls, having had her water shut off. So just another story, and I think that speaks really to me about remembering that we're your customers. I hear you guys saying that, but I'm not so sure that it trickles down and is deep within the organization. So that's probably a cultural change issue. And then sort of 2 statements. One is, I hear you. I want to believe that what you're saying, Acting General Manager, that it is going to be better, that there's going to be better performance. But I think back to when they came to present one of those public meetings about doing Sligo Creek. And there was a certain amount of time, I think it was supposed to be 90 days the project was completed. I was sort of amazed. And so we asked, well, if it doesn't happen in time, are you going to be back here to tell us? Are you going to come and answer our questions? Oh, yes, don't worry, here's my card, you know. And Councilmember Clay, you probably know better than I do how long that went on. No one ever came back and talked to us. I mean, sure, they talked to the city public works director to some degree, but it was maddening how long it was taking, and that's a major thoroughfare. So the statement is just, be true. Let's not have more of sort of the nice show, good words, but then not performance afterwards. And then the second statement has to do with July 4th. So Carroll Avenue is the July 4th parade in Tacoma Park, which will be in its 126th year, is that right? I think it was 125 last year. So 126th year will be going down Carroll Avenue. It goes down Carroll Avenue every year. And it doesn't sound like the work will actually be done where the road can be remilled on that day by that point, right? Because you said the work will be done in August, but the milling won't happen. But I'm sure that we can coordinate so that proper permanent patches are done along there prior to July 4th, so that, and part of this is there's, you know, cars that go down the road as part of the July 4th parade that are not Humvees. You know, some of these are made in 1920 and 1930 and don't have the suspension of a modern car. And that is a huge, important event to our community. And as your customers, we would really ask that you make sure that for that event, yes, we want Carroll Avenue fixed in general, and I am encouraged that the patching will get better, but that is a day that is very important to us, and I think you can resolve that issue for us. So thank you.
Good evening. I'm Reuben Snipper. I'm also a council member in Tacoma Park, Ward 5, which is the ward that's over along Flower Avenue between Flower and Sligo Creek Parkway on one side and Carroll Avenue and Piney Branch on the other. It has a couple of other little pieces to it, but that's basically what it is. And Erie Avenue was one of the roads that you have been working on. I won't it's the same story as you've heard before, promises of when it would begin, you know, lots of delays, et cetera. We're now waiting for the final patch. But the issue I would like you to address is that the work is basically done. We're waiting for the final milling or whatever it's called to turn the pavement back into nice pavement. But the water pressure in the street is lower for several houses, and certainly no more than this, the same water pressure after replacement of the pipe. So we have a number of houses on the street who now have lower water pressure than they had before. Needless to say, this is fairly disappointing. I know, I don't know how many houses have called in total, but I know one house has, and WSSC has come out and done some tests and basically has said it's the homeowner's problem. It's a little hard to really understand that argument, given that there's kind of a before and after, and the difference between the before and after is the pipe was replaced. So I realize that if in fact it is true that the water pressure is lower on the street, that would be rather disappointing, to say the least, because it's unrealistic to expect, 60 years from now you might replace the pipe, but it's not likely you're going to do it. So I will have my neighbors call instead of, individually. I can get a list of them. The second thing I want to say is I want to summarize a bit the experience that people have been talking about concerning contractors. I work for the federal government, had a lot of experience with contracting out. Contracting out can work. It is possible for it to work. There are situations in which it works well, in fact. However, as you've heard this evening, contracting out is not working well for WSSC. And the reason is simple. When you contract out, you lose the accountability. You gain the expertise and so on that the contractor can provide that perhaps you don't have on staff, but you lose the accountability. And the reason is very, very simple, because if the contractor is a bad contractor, your main option is what we in the federal government call the nuclear option, which is an unfortunate name, but it refers to you cancel the contract or whatever, you end the contract and you get a new contractor. Meanwhile, of course, the work hasn't gotten done or it's been done badly, whatever, you have a whole bunch of dissatisfied workers in that work, and that's what you've heard tonight. I realize it's probably above your place in the company, but I do urge you to do all you can to shift from a contracting out model to a model in which you have at least some staff on, some people on staff who actually do the work. And the reason is that you will then have accountability for it. When the work is done, you will know who it is. They don't go away. That person or persons will be responsible. It does look more expensive because you have more full-time equivalents on your payroll. I know how this works. The drive is to have fewer full-time equivalents. On the other hand, you'll have a lot more satisfactory work. So I urge you to give that serious consideration. And I won't repeat, I have many of the comments of Josh, although he was way more articulate than I am, so I won't, or any of the others here, so I won't repeat those. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Frederick Barron. I didn't bring my pitchfork this evening, and I'm sorry I left my bag of gravel at home. I think you'd have a lot more people here because a lot of people in our community are very concerned about the state of, particularly the state of our roads, but also sort of the overall process. But unfortunately, they weren't able to get here because of the state of our roads. Let me start with some thanks. Thanks to Heather and Patrick on her behalf for arranging this evening, and the others for coming and speaking to us and hearing us out. I'd also like to particularly thank Teresa Daniel. We have corresponded by email when we had a wonderful incident where our water was shut off with no notice whatsoever. Turns out our water wasn't even supposed to have been shut off. It had to do with valves being shut that weren't supposed to have been shut or something like that. I'm not sure anybody was ever held accountable for that, but in any case, we did get no notice on that, but I do appreciate your efforts to achieve some accountability there. I recognize that you have challenging jobs. It's an old system. It's under-resourced. We have these Montgomery County, Prince George's County issues and so on, and your job is made no easier by being in an interim role. And clearly, some of our political leaders have some things that they need to work on in terms of the Montgomery County, Prince George's County issues, in terms of the funding issues and so on, that I realize, make your lives more difficult and make it more difficult for you to accomplish what we need to do in terms of assuring a safe and reliable water supply. All that said, I think above all, what we're looking for is accountability. We need accountability for not just an immediate task. We need accountability for getting the job done right in the long run. That means getting the pipes in there correctly in a way that they're going to last. That means accountability for the condition of the temporary road patches, for the quote-unquote permanent patches, for the ultimate repaving that's done. There's been a lot of discussion about contracting and the abysmal performance of many of your contractors. The fact is that they haven't been held accountable. And I just want to echo something that Ruben was going into, and that is, rather than having essentially putting out something for bid, having a contractor and either going on or off, I think it's a question about structuring your contracts in a way that provide the right incentives. You need to have contracts that say, okay, if we inspect and we find holes above a certain size in your cold patch, we're going to ding you $1,000. If your quote-unquote permanent patch doesn't last more than a week when it was supposed to last X number of months, we're going to ding you X $1,000. If the pipe breaks within the next 10 years that you laid, or within the next 20 years, or whatever, some accountability period, then you're responsible for the cost of fixing it. That you need to build those incentives into it. And I think one of the most important incentives to build into it is time, because if things are done more quickly, then there are fewer days. I mean, if each day you're trying to put steel plates over things again and put cold patch over it again, then you're wasting a lot of time doing that, opening up the holes again every morning and closing them down every night. Whereas if you do it in a smaller number of days, if you do the work more quickly, obviously, it's less of an inconvenience both in terms of the roads and in terms of people who don't have water, but it also means that you shouldn't be, that it should be less wasteful of the contractor time to get it done. I do think some more work needs to be done in terms of systemic planning. I understand the metrics you were talking about in terms of when you decide to repair what pipe. But I think you also need to do some kind of long-term plan that says, okay, here are the pipes that are our problem. Once we're replacing this one's old as well. We're shutting off these people's water anyway, or we're closing this road anyway. Let's go ahead and do that one as well. And to try to do that kind of systemic planning rather than doing it on what seems a very ad hoc basis. So above all, I think what we're looking for is oversight, and we can't have layers of contractors. You can't. It never works to have a contractor overseeing a contractor overseeing a contractor. You would need people that work for you, that are responsible for enforcing the contract, and have the contract have those proper incentives in it. So I hope that you'll consider that. Finally, one issue that hasn't been brought up, but I think is something that is going to need more attention, and that is water conservation. And I hope that that WSSC will play an appropriate role in promoting water conservation and making more efficient use of our water, because it is a scarce resource and we all need to recognize that. Thank you very much for your time.
I want to say I think you should be commended for doing this amount of work in such a complicated urban area. I think it's very difficult to do, and I think your efforts should be applauded. On the other hand, I do believe that, based on what I heard tonight, there are some issues with contractor performance. And I don't want to go through those again because those have already been pretty much exhausted, I think. I have a specific issue that occurred to me that I'm hoping is not representative of the way WSSC deals with claims. but, and I didn't bring my notes up here, but to the best of my recollection, about 4 or 5 days after, I live on Sligo Creek Parkway, about 4 or 5 days after the contractor came through to replace the water line, our sewage backed up in our house. And we brought in a plumber who basically ran for 2 consecutive days to try to find out where the problem was, ran a snake all the way down to basically right around where WSSC's property was. And he indicated that not only was there breakage on our line, but there was also a blockage possibly from that breakage further into WSSC's line. So the plumber put in new pipes in the area that was damaged and put in a clean out. I called WSSC the next day, the claims department, and talked to them about the situation. I was told to fax the information, including the invoices that we paid the plumber with, for a total of $6,400 over to WSSC. I didn't hear anything. I faxed it, didn't hear anything for a couple days, called WSSC claims back, and was told that the lady I spoke with was in the process of denying the claim because she couldn't read the fax. So I said, you know, understand, I'll refax it. So I did, and I also included some additional documentation. I waited about 3 or 4 days. Nothing happened. I called back again, and I was told that the documentation that I provided and the explanation in the 2-page letter was not sufficient, and she again was in the process of denying the claim. Over the course of the following month, we had 4 additional backups in my sewage line. Thank God, the plumber that we hired put in a clean out, and so the sewage was spilling out on the parkway. WSSC responded rapidly with the cleanup, so that was not an issue. But what it illustrated was that there was still a problem on WSSC's line that was probably responsible for backing up our sewage all the way up. It took me over a month to actually get after stopping the denial letter 3 times, it took me a month to get WSSC to agree to come out and look at the site and how this could have occurred. Basically, our sewage line is no more than 6 or 7 inches from the water line that was replaced, and that area was dug up twice by WSSC. So, I mean, if you look at the sequence of events, it's pretty hard to argue that one wouldn't have had to do with the other, as opposed to 2 independent activities occurring, the blockage and WSSC tearing up the road. WSSC came out to the site. I was told later that they still didn't feel that it was their responsibility. So at that point in time, I contacted some local council members and what have you. And I finally got WSSC to come out with the contractor as well as the manager that was managing that portion of the work for WSSC. And there was still, and WSSC actually snaked it with video camera 3 times. Everybody said that there's a blockage down here, and it was probably responsible for the problem that we had, but it just didn't seem to register. Like I said, WSSC along with the contractor then came out and videotaped it again. We all watched the videotape. Our sewage line was clean. There was no problems with it. There was a blockage at the other end. So I got a call the next day from the contractor saying that he's going to offer us half of the $6,400 that we paid for the sewage backup. And I told him it was unacceptable because the sequence of events simply didn't add up to any responsibility on my part. We ultimately solved and came to an agreement on the price. And I'm very happy for that. But it's kind of echoing some of the other comments I heard that when there is an issue, that it really almost requires you to go to the political route in order to get the attention. And it's unfortunate. I understand you guys got a huge system you're dealing with, but it would seem to me there might be a way, or maybe there should be a way, to kind of vet some of the claims that clearly are not valid to the claims that might have some validity. And I frankly had a hard time getting past that one point of, no, we're going to deny it no matter what. So that's my comment.
John, can you do me a favor? Can you give his address for us?
We already know this. We know this case.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you guys already know.
Okay.
Yeah, I can
give it to
give you a hook, line, and sinker the story.
I guess I'm going to echo the same thing as he did, but mine was like 27 years ago. and I actually dealt with Mr. Hocevar. But I had to threaten to come down and throw my naked body across his desk until he paid some attention to me, because it was the same thing. It was their broken thing. My sewer backed up, and took me a long time to resolve it. But I do want to say one thing. I do think that with your contractors, you might think about giving them an IQ test. Because what happened to me, their equipment was parked, and I had to pull around the equipment. And one of your contractors' trucks, big truck, came roaring down. This was Sherman Avenue again, came roaring down. So I was already, you know, on the wrong side trying to go around this, and I would have backed up, except that he just kept coming and rolled right into it, and then he said I hit him. So which happened? Luckily, there were pictures. So in my car, there, and it was a big thing. I mean, the wheel was like up to the window, you know, of his truck. But in my fender, there was a hole, and then it went down. So, you know, it would have been hard for me to hit him and go up, you know. Anyway, he denied it. Finally, I got in touch with the contractor. Finally, the insurance company took care of it, and they did pay for it. But what a pain in the you-know-what to have to deal with all this, you know. So I wasn't a happy camper. So it looks like it's been going on for a long time. I've been in Tacoma Park 40-some years. And as I say, I had the same problem that the gentleman before me had, you know, and it was really terrible. So anyway, I would hope that it would improve, but I'm certainly glad we have water.
Hello, my name is Elaine Vario, and I live at 7310 Flower Avenue, and I'm represented by Colleen Clay, and I think she has characterized some of the problems that people on my street have experienced. I'm on Flower, and this section that is east of Carroll Avenue, and I realize I have one question. Right now there is construction going on my street. Does anyone know whether that is WSSC? Okay, I think it is. Well, I think this is an example of one of the notification problems, and that I discovered. I walked out the other morning, and someone was asking me whose car this was parked on the street, and I figured, oh, they must be doing some construction, they must be doing something, but there was no sign, and there was no reason to not park on the street. Anyways, and so I said, oh, they must be doing something, and there was no notification again. So they stopped, and then the contractors came out and put up notification signs. So in this instance, that worked. But I think I'm here mainly tonight because a variety of our neighbors we've complained, and we've been very angry about the quality of and my issue personally is the quality of the patching. Now, I've heard this before from other people who can probably use the technical terms correctly, but it seems that our issue is that we had a cold patch, which is temporary, and then it's not an even patch. It's very rough. It's not smoothed. So the patches become a problem themselves, and then the amount of time, as I understand, before a permanent patch is applied is much longer than maybe was expected. But I also wanted to say to you, to thank you for coming, and another comment I've heard from neighbors is the expectations of arrogance on the part of WSSC. And I don't come to these meetings very often, and I haven't heard you people talk, but I want to thank you for apologizing for the what you even deem as poor performance. I, as a citizen, may not know that that doesn't meet your standard, and you, sir, saying that that not being able to get an answer from the engineer named on the sign does not meet your standards is useful to me. I will say there are times I don't know who is digging up my street, but I understand it has to be done. But recently, in the past several months, it's the quality of the patching that's driving us bonkers. And I was interested in So basically, I want to know that the current project is yours, it sounds like, and we're just looking forward to the street being back to normal, as I think many people on Carroll Avenue are. And I'm just hoping this is not indicative of the kind of oversight of contractors, and I look forward to hearing more about your improved evaluation of contractors, because that would be an ongoing issue. And it sounds like attending the pre-construction meeting, that Tacoma Park people attending that is at least sounds like one reasonable option. So thank you very much for being here and hearing your apology.
My name is Gary Geck. I live on Pine Avenue, and I actually was on the street with one of the good contractors. So everything on our street went very well, and in fact, in general, I'm supportive of WSSC. I will acknowledge I do work in the water industry, not directly for WSSC, but there are a few people in Tacoma Park that support wholeheartedly what's going on. With that, a couple items. I would encourage you to continue to try to raise the water rates, to pay for improvements, and to do other improvements that are forthcoming. I know you catch or hear a lot of people that complain about it. That hasn't been brought up at all today, but I encourage you to continue to raise rates to pay for these improvements. Couple items, I think, for clarification's point, and maybe you were going to have a rebuttal point at some point anyway, to clarify, the construction contractors that you've had problems with and generally people are talking about, they are low bid contractors, are they not still?
They are.
So you have to accept the low bid contract at this point.
We have to accept the lowest responsive, responsible bid.
How often do you ever throw a bid out?
Well, there's bid errors and things. I mean, I don't know the percentage, but it's greater than zero.
Greater than zero, but less than 10%?
Probably.
All right. So generally, in this economy, would it be correct to say that the bids are coming in lower and lower because people are desperate for work?
I think we've seen some competition. I don't know that I would characterize it quite that far.
All right. And in your evaluation system, is it robust where you would be able to throw out a contractor more readily than you have been for a non-responsive bid? The purpose of your evaluation system, is it to be able to throw people out easier, or is it just so you know who's the good contractor?
To be honest, sir, the problem with responsibility is if the person is actually able to do the work, you should give them the job. Okay. It has nothing to do with whether they do quality. What the grading system does is if they fail in the grading system, unfortunately you have to live through them. But if you, even if they aren't thrown off the job, terminated for default or something, but if they fail, they will be suspended from being able to bid from work, and so we won't get them on a contract for a while. Right. That's the way the grading system is going to work.
And this is the industry standard across the country for the most part, correct?
There are places that don't grade, and there are places that do. The ones that do tend to do it this way.
Okay. And I guess I would contrast that with engineering consultants and contracting mechanisms, which I guess are not on a low bid mechanism, correct?
They are not. In fact, price is usually not a consideration when you're trying to pick a designer. And the quality of their work and their experience and all of that are the type of things that you use to evaluate a designer.
All right. So I threw that out to give a chance to someone discuss why you end up with bad contractors. So I'm not sure everyone always understands that. Permanent patching, temporary patching, I think there's some confusion, but we won't go into that. I will ask the question, and Daryl's still here. My street, Pine Avenue, I'm pretty sure is considered a permanent patch. Is that slated to be mill and overlaid also? Good. Personally, I like the permanent patches, assuming they're done correctly. Pine Avenue, Elm Avenue has permanent patches. I think Lincoln, where'd Bruce go? Yep. Lincoln has a permanent patch. I don't know if that's slated for mill and overlay or not. Personally, I think the mill and overlay is a big waste of money, especially when they make WSSC pay for it, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the road, the road itself is the responsibility of either the city or the county, and I actually appreciate that you're not spending the money mill and overlay. Now, some roads may need that, but others don't. I find the counties seem to want to take advantage of WSSC and get you to pave their roads. Personally, I think they're supposed to have the road expertise and you're supposed to have the pipeline expertise, so I'll throw that out there as well. And I don't know whether there's a standing policy on how much you agree to fix roads. Clearly in the construction phase, there's some issues to be had. You've heard those stories. But I would encourage you to resist mill and overlaying when it doesn't need to be done. And with that, if there's anyone else, thank you. Thank you for coming out and listening to all of us.
Trying to be brief. Bob Sheldon on Boyd Avenue. I'm trying to understand the permit process that you go through when you come to Tacoma Park, and that applies to all utilities that come in and dig up our roads. Do you have to get a permit when you come in?
We're not required to, but we do.
Okay. Does somebody from the city then go, who checks the work then to make certain that the repair work has been done correctly? Does the city have to come and sign off on that at all?
I do not know.
Does anybody from the city come out and, or how does your work get approved when this, who declares that the road is then?
Well, when we work with State Highway, for instance, the State Highway folks have folks there that I know because I've spoken with them. Presumably, whoever the road authority is coordinating with the folks that I have that are running the pavement. But whether they actually sign off on it and approve it or not, I truly don't know.
Okay. Because I actually disagree with the previous speaker about, well, the repair work on Lincoln Avenue, at least from a bicycle's perspective, the road, when I make a left turn off of Maple onto Lincoln, the pavement's really uneven at that point. And I realize that you've come back in the past year and corrected that, but the work that's been done it's very uneven. If you go down there and look at it, it would not be a road that I would want. I would want the road to be restored back to the way it was before. And I hope that in the repair work that you do in the future, that you look at Lincoln and look at the work that was done there at Lincoln and Maple and try to improve upon that, because it has not been a good process. And also, when I talk about the city and so on, there are a couple instances where Washington Gas just came in last Tuesday, and dug up at 7134 Carroll Avenue. And that was an emergency repair that was done. But what has happened there is, I saw the backhoe in, and I've also seen the repair work that Washington Gas did. And I know that there was a leak, and that's an emergency, and they would not need a permit to come in. But I hope that somebody from the city would then go back and check that at 7134 Carroll and make certain that that work is done correctly. Because it's a similar patch situation to what I'm encountering with WSSC on Carroll Avenue, where the patch now is sinking, and that work done. But also that any utility work that's being done on Carroll, I ride a bicycle to work. I've been doing it for 35 years. The worst roads that I've ever encountered have been WSSC's work. And it's very dangerous for me on Carroll because I like to ride the gutter. I like to ride as far to the right as possible. But your repair work is such that it moves me out into the middle of the road. And I'm pretty confident about this, and been doing it for an awful long time. But your roads are endangering me. But I also want the city to be aware that when anybody comes and digs up the street, that they should be going out and checking and making certain that the repair work is being done correctly. And there was an example just on my street on Boyd Avenue, and I brought this to the city's attention a year ago, where there was a repair work done. I don't know if there's a permit that was given for this, but it's right at the corner of Carroll and Boyd. And the patchwork is such that the undercasement or the cement work that's underneath the pavement is being exposed, and so there's freezing and thawing going on, and there's water there, and that's going to be at the city's expense. But you should be monitoring what's going on to our streets, It should be, is there a permit? Is there somebody who then follows up with that permit? Looks at it. I also want to know what's happening to the sinkhole at 7119 Carroll Avenue, which is, whose responsibility is that? It's a hole where there was a cone that was left in the hole. Who's in charge of that? WSSC. Okay. Okay. Right. Well, but I hope that you correct that. I mean, there have been a couple of patches that have been done to that, but it's bad. But I hope that you can work with the city. I really appreciate the fact that you've come to this meeting. I appreciate the District 20 bringing this in the City Council. At the last meeting that we had at District 20, there was actually WSSC went and I don't know if it was because of that meeting or not, but there were improvements to Carroll Avenue in the parking area in Old Town, and it's not great now, but it's much better than it was. So I hope that you continue to do that type of work. Or I don't know if the response was to that meeting or not, but stuff is getting better. Okay, thanks.
And if I could just say a few words, we're already past 9:30, and we were hoping to wrap this up by 9:30, so I hope everybody got their questions in. And if you have anything else, if you want to turn the sheet in and maybe take an opportunity as we finish here, and while the folks from WSSC are still here, I'm sure they'd be happy to stick around for a few minutes and talk to anybody who needs to talk to them. I want to provide a little more information about the permanent patch and the mill and overlay process. And I think I have this right, that currently with the agreement between WSSC and the city, when they finish their work, they provide a permanent patch, and then there is a payment by WSSC of some amount of money to the city toward when it needs to be mill and overlaid in the future. And I think it's something like a 50-50 match, so that WSSC provides 50% of the money. The city then has to come up with the other 50%, and the time at which it gets milled and overlaid goes into the mix of the whole ordering of the shape of the roads in the city and what needs it the most. And as it's currently configured for the city process, that just kind of waits until the work needs to be done, and then we have to come up with the money in our budget for that 50% match. With the State Highway Administration for Carroll Avenue, their standard contract for this kind of work says that WSSC or other utilities have to mill and overlay the lane in which the work took place. And so I think Carroll Avenue will be the only road that will have mill and overlay where WSSC has been working. Darrell, did I miss anything on that, on the mill and overlay?
Certain streets that we have the 50-50 payment arrangement. If a street is in good condition, we negotiate that with WSSC and have the payment. If the street is in bad condition and we're planning to repay it anyway, we have to charge that.
Okay.
The city's reevaluating the process. Obviously, WSSC does it cooperatively. Most recent application that we received for WSSC, we asked them to mill and overlay curb to curb. So we may be changing what we're asking for given the past couple of years of experience and the bad condition of the streets.
Okay. And the other question that was about your contracting process, my understanding is that your new process for evaluating contractors and dealing with ones who you've deemed unsatisfactory is that they basically can't rebid for another year, and then they can come back and bid again?
Several years.
Several years?
Suspended for a minimum of a year.
I would encourage you to think about a harder slap on the wrist than that. We don't want to see that same contractor back doing work in the city. We've had that experience, and just encourage you to make that process more permanent. And just the one concern that came up about low pressure after the work is done, my layman's sense is that it could well be that that's debris in the water lines, and I'm not sure what WSSC does, if there's any process for dealing with the debris in the water lines that results from all of the various replacement work and, drilling new lines into new feeder pipes. And I know my own experience has been that ever since our street was done and was finished a year and a half ago now, we've had to kind of take apart pressure-reducing valves and clean all the grit out of them, and take out screens and faucets and debris, clogging toilet fill valves so that the toilet doesn't fill. It's a continuing process, and my sense is that a lot of people may experience that with the heightened degree of work in the area. And one question that I'm not sure that you would have an answer to, but my sense from speaking with my plumber was that there was a lot more chlorine in the water, and I didn't know if there was any way that you have of increasing whatever you put into the mix in the water when there's a lot of work going on, or whether that would have to be a system-wide thing that you wouldn't do. But my sense was that there are a lot of rubber parts that are deteriorating a lot faster.
Let me see your attempt to address those two questions. The first one, without knowing the specific address and doing an in-home inspection, I think you're pretty much on target. As we replace water mains, there is tendency that we stir up debris within the pipeline itself. Eventually, as we recharge the line, some of the debris may make their way into faucets and so on, all that. And each faucet has an aerator or screen that can be taken apart and cleaned. And certainly the pressure-reducing valves, which install generally in the basement area where the water line comes in, if that malfunctions, then you will have a pressure issue. So obviously we need to take a closer look at the specific problem within a specific home. But generally, that would be my guess. As far as the chlorine residual is concerned, no, we don't heighten the chlorine residuals within a distribution system just because we're having water main replacement there. One thing I would point out is that sometimes some of the homeowners use these so-called these blue tablets, whatever they put in the tank itself to make sure when they flush they got blue water and so on. Those tablets sometimes would prematurely deteriorate the rubber parts. So just pay attention to that. But chlorine residual wise, we don't purposely, raise that level just because we're doing water main replacement.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for coming, and thank you to Patrick Metz and Jeremy Crandall, and who work for Heather Mazier, and all the effort that they've put into making this forum possible. And we'll call it a night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you
for your honesty.